I'd like to call the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting back to order on Tuesday, May 12th. We are down to agenda item 12A, which is public hearing and second reading on ordinance number PA 1317 in the matter of amending ordinance number PA 1282 to adopt additional findings addressing LUBA remand issues and supporting the statewide planning goal 14 reasons exception to allow urban levels of industrial development on existing residential industrial zone lands in Goshen and adopting savings and severability clauses, file number PA 1205232. And we have Mr. Rust and Mr. Voorhees here, so if you guys want to take it away with staff presentation first.
Thank you, Chair Bozovic, Commissioners. I'll be very brief, and then you can get to the hearing and hear from folks who have signed up here. I haven't checked the sign-up sheet, but I assume there may be some folks here to testify. This is, as you said, to really address the remand issues that were sent back to deal with the Goal 14 reasons exception for rural industrial lands, existing rural industrial lands inside the unincorporated community of Goshen. And what you have in front of you is the ordinance that has additional findings as part of the exception process to incorporate into the Rural Comprehensive Plan to justify the level of commercial uses that are allowed in the general industrial and light industrial zones that you adopted back in June of 2013. And this ordinance also readopts the exception and the code provisions that were put in place then to make sure that because of the LUBA remand, there's not any question about the efficacy of that previous action. And the three issues were primarily making sure that the commercial uses, limited kind of related commercial uses, were also justified under the exception, and part of that exception, it wasn't explicit enough in the findings, so we've made that more explicit. It addresses the analysis of the effect of wetlands in the area, and there are some additional findings there that address that based on the record already that exists. And then it also has, and one of the reasons we are actually having reopened the record and are having this hearing is that it also incorporates the recently completed wastewater study, feasibility study for the Goshen area to show that there is going to be, in a timely fashion, if necessary, sufficient facilities to manage wastewater in that area, depending on the level of development that actually occurs. So those are the three issues that LUBA remanded. There are findings that address all of those. We incorporated and also referred to the wastewater study and have included that in the record. There's only one comment, I think, that we've actually received, and I've distributed copies of the letter dated March 11 from Charles Island, the third general manager of Thomas H. Ireland Inc., Umpqua Resources, LLC. And so it speaks to an issue that is not really a part of the remand, but you're welcome to listen to and consider, whether that affects your willingness to move forward. But right now, what's in front of you is an ordinance that readopts the previous action, both the comprehensive plan amendment and the code provisions, and adopts those additional revised findings and amendments to the findings document to justify the Goal 14 exception. And it's ready for you to act on today, depending on whether you think there are changes that are necessary or not once you've heard from everybody. But unless you have questions, I'll stop at that. And with me at the table is Mark Rust, who did a lot of the primary work on this thing as it got to you in June, and has also assisted in crafting and presenting the ordinance that is in front of you right now.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Sorensen.
What is the effect of this zoning change in the Goshen area on the CV Loop issues and discussion that the city of Springfield has had over the CV Loop area and the potential for industrializing the CV Loop area? What has this proceeding got to do with that?
The short answer is nothing. This is focused on just the Goshen unincorporated community. It doesn't change anything anywhere else. It was in play when the board acted on this in June of 2013. Those changes were made to the Goshen area, the plan changes and the zone changes. And so this change has been out there and in effect since then. And to my knowledge, it's not really played a role, but I've not been up on all the conversations around the Springfield study and where they go with their industrial lands inventory. But from my understanding is they've been aware of this, and it has not affected what they need to do, because it does not add or detract or in any way change what Springfield may do in terms of their industrial land.
Well, let me ask you this way. This is more of a common sense question. If this zone change goes through and there is a wastewater facility built to handle additional wastewater on the west side of Interstate 5 in the unincorporated Goshen area, will that make it easier to develop an industrial area on the east side of I-5 in the Goshen area? And will, with the presence of this industrial wastewater facility, make it easier to locate industrial land on the other side of the freeway?
I think the short answer is no. It wouldn't. Any such action on that side would have to stand or fall on its own merit and its choices of where to go to address those wastewater facilities. If it's inside the Eugene Springfield Metropolitan Plan, that would ostensibly be part of that public facilities plan that would have to address that. And as you know, in the wastewater study, there are a number of options that are laid out as potential and feasible options for handling wastewater within the Goshen area primarily.
Right. And now, Mr. Ireland's letter says, as we understand, the change from rural designation to general industrial zone would have severe limitations on industrial services and freight services, which we would fall under, making it impossible for us to build a facility. So could Mr. Ireland and his company build this log truck facility if this is approved?
As I understand it, and I haven't gone into a lot of detail with what they have proposed and not got to exactly what they want to do, where and how, the current zone, the zone that has been adopted, the general industrial, light industrial zoning that was adopted in 2013, would not outright allow this kind of thing, similar to what might have been possible under the previous rural industrial zoning, but we're not even quite sure how it would fit into that zoning, and that would depend on entirely what they want to do and how they want to use the property. So without looking into it more, I think the short answer is no. It may continue to affect the ability to develop, but we'd have to take a closer look at that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Stewart?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to address a question by Commissioner Sorensen. I think there's some confusion behind how this might impact CV Loop. By an offer, we had a joint elected officials meeting between Springfield and Lane County, and I think this was about a year and a half ago, where I presented a potential solution for what appears to be a very contentious item in the CV Loop, where instead of looking at CV Loop proper for industrial lands, maybe they could keep it narrowed to the existing industrial lands and potentially use some of the CV or the Goshen area, excuse me. And the board received an official letter from the city of Springfield that they wanted to look into this. And since that, receiving that letter, and the board has seen a letter from Springfield thanking us for this idea, but their staff believes that it's not possible for them to use Goshen industrial land to meet their industrial land's needs. So essentially they have denied using Goshen for any type of industrial lands needs. So that's complicated and probably unclear, but essentially this stands on its own merits and has no connection to the CV Loop process. The second item is, and I appreciate Ireland's for sending this letter, it's always been my intent in multiple meetings with the landowners in the Goshen area that if this zoning was to actually take place and allow for more intense use or more intense larger structures to be developed, that's what was trying to be accomplished, was the limitation on the size of structures of 40,000 square feet, lift that so that there could be larger structures built there and more employment opportunities, more employees per acre. It's always been my intent and my promise to the citizens in Goshen that, you know, you have a piece of property and you have intent to use. It's kind of like Umpqua Dairy is planning, they purchased their facility quite some time ago and planning on a redistribution center there for their ice cream products. We have recently acquisition of the Cone Lumber Company site by Zippo, and you know, we have now, I just learned last night, this Ireland acquisition. It was never the intent that the folks couldn't use their property, and it's my understanding it may just be a code item that the board could address later so that the folks could use the property as they intended. So hopefully that will ease a little bit of concern too in this process, but I encourage everybody to make their comments.
Any other questions for staff? I will note for the record that Commissioner Likens excused. He got called away unexpectedly. I want to just make brightly clear that adopting this ordinance to amend our previous ordinance is only dealing with Goshen and has no impact on CV Loop or College View at all. Is that absolutely a true statement?
As far as I know, that's true, yes, indeed.
Okay. And you know, to Commissioner Sorensen's question about whether or not it could help justify some of that, because we're showing that it's possible to provide sewer to the Goshen area, sewer facilities. Many of those options are standalone sewer systems just for the Goshen lands. That doesn't help CV Loop and College View at all. And even if it was the option to pipe the sewage over to the Metro wastewater treatment plant, they still have to also still do their own version of that system if that's the way they're going to go about it. So those lands will have to stand on their own as to whether they can meet adequate public facilities, just as we are having to stand on our own to meet adequate public facilities. So I have one more question about sewers, because this came up from a property owner that's not an industrial owner down there, just in general in Goshen. A concern is if there is ultimately a sewer system put in to serve some of the new industrial development down there, the higher level industrial development, will that require other property owners in Goshen to be forced to hook up to that system? Is any action we're taking today going to force somebody to hook up to a sewer system?
I think the short answer to that, again, is no. As you know, the feasibility study only looked at, is it feasible to do something to handle the more intense uses that are authorized under the industrial zoning. And so I would think that would be the focus of this board when and if it gets to the point of having to decide that it's necessary and a wastewater facility has to be put in to handle the development that this authorizes. Doesn't speak to the residential or existing current system, and this board would have to make a conscious decision at that time if you wanted to expand it to include that or make it available to those folks. But it certainly would not, this action will not dictate the terms of that discussion and the outcome of it. And at this point, the feasibility study was only on the projected additional uses and intensities of development in the industrial lands that this will authorize.
Thank you. Mr.
If I could just speak to that for a moment. We did discuss that issue through the sewer feasibility study process. The one, I guess, exception to that would be if and when a sewer system is developed and say an individual residence septic system failed and they were within 300 feet of the new sewer system, state law regulations could require them to hook up to that sewer system then at that time, but not ahead of that.
Yeah. And that's only if the system failed, and it's not just 300 feet, but it's 300 feet and the ability to hook up, which means it's got to be downhill.
Yeah.
A few other things.
Correct, yes.
So, yeah, I'm very familiar with that, that particular portion as in my previous lifetime as a civil engineer, having to hook up failed septic systems. But it's about not only 300 feet, but you also have to have the ability to hook up, which may mean you also have to be within, for the one example I have is in North Florence. If you're not within the city limits of Florence, you don't have the legal right to hook up to the city system. Whereas if they put the sewer system in by a district and you're outside the district's boundaries, you may not have the legal right to hook up to that system. So there's lots of reasons why you may not be forced to hook up, rather in the future, just repair your existing system. So thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll move on to the public hearing process. So I'd like to open the public hearing on ordinance 1317, and I have two people signed up to speak right now. The first one is Charles Ireland, and if you want to come up to the podium. Okay, thank you. So it sounds, then we have Michael Farthing. You'll state your name for the record, Mike.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioners, Michael Farthing. I represent Cecil Saxon, who owns several properties in Goshen and is also a longtime resident there, at least 30 years. We, Cecil and I both, strongly support the county's proposal. We followed it. I think it's 20 years overdue, but it's better late than never. I commend you for taking this action to stimulate and enhance economic development and activity and job growth. I believe your staff has done an excellent job in preparing this, persevering, and both with regard to the initial application and in responding to the remand issues. From my perspective as a land use attorney, a Goal 14 exception on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the easiest and 10 being the most difficult, is the most difficult land use application you can get, or at least one of the most difficult. I've never been able to do it. In fact, I've discouraged people from doing it. What it means to me at its core is that your staff and you are able to demonstrate that this property offers an opportunity that no other property inside the UGB offers. The three remand issues don't deal with what I believe to be the most important issue. They deal with, as was outlined, the wetlands issue, commercial uses inside the industrial areas, and the sewer feasibility issue. I think the feasibility study is very detailed, and the alternatives are both credible and doable in the long run. I personally support the Metro Wastewater connection for a number of reasons, two of which, LCC to me is another unique opportunity area. I was able to sit in on a plan presented to the Springfield City Council on what LCC would like to do with their campus or surrounding. It would require sewer, in my opinion. And I think we as a community have really ignored the opportunities at the LCC campus. The other opportunity, and I'm a little, I don't know that much about it, is the leachate at Short Mountain. And I understand that this would be an opportunity to take care of that, perhaps in a more environmentally sensitive manner. I want to respond briefly in connection with if in fact you were able to politically extend Metro Wastewater to this area, and I understand there's a lot of things that would have to occur, and that may be not doable in the near future, but if you were able to, I don't see CV Loop as being threatened by that. That's a policy issue, and that's something that can be dealt with by the policymakers, you and the affected cities. In regard to that, CV Loop can stay the way it is. There are some industrial areas along there, but that's just drawing lines and indicating where the sewer is best needed. And again, I see LCC as a real opportunity, as well as Goshen. I think this proposal demonstrates how the county can directly stimulate the economy. You, as a policy board, can stimulate the economy by providing this enhanced, I call it supersized rural industrial zoning. It is an area that is already zoned and developed to a certain extent. It's along the I-5 corridor, which is the backbone of the West Coast. And if you look at Lane County, Coburg, Springfield, Crestwell, and Cottage Grove all have capitalized on that location next to the I-5 corridor. From my perspective, Eugene has turned its back on I-5, and that's what we get. You know, you don't even know Eugene's there when you drive by on I-5. I believe this is, borrowing from old sub-area plans, an opportunity area. This is an area that is unique. It's at a major intersection along I-5, the Highway 58 and I-5. I think transportation corridors and facilities are the keys to economic growth. I would just point you to Beltline and the Willamette River crossing is where I believe attention ought to be devoted. Instead, the city of Eugene is looking at South Willamette Street alternatives. I think the Valley River Bridge should be revisited. I think it's another ideal opportunity. And finally, a southbound lane off of I-5 onto Franklin Boulevard, I think would be an ideal access point to our major employer, the University of Oregon. This county and the metro area can grow with your help and participation, and I applaud your effort. I support you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was all the people I have signed up to speak at the public hearing. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board on this ordinance? If not, I will close the public hearing. And does that also close the record? Or do we need to have a separate motion to close the record?
No, that would close the hearing, I think is fine.
And we'll close the record. Thank you. So, discussion by the board. Commissioner Sorensen.
This matter was sent back to us as a result of an appeal of the board's previous decision. The appellants were Landwatch Lane County. Then the Land Use Board of Appeals made a decision. It's now back in front of us. Has there been any discussion with Landwatch Lane County about whether these revised plans meet their approval, and if they in fact agree that this is the right way to go?
I've not had any discussion with them, but we have let them know what is happening and that they were included in the notice of the board's deliberation and hearing and action. So I've not reached out to them, but I'd be more than willing to talk to them if they wanted to talk, but I've not heard anything.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Stewart.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any further questions. I want to thank staff for their hard work on this. This has been something that's been in the works for at least 6 years. I proposed this to a previous board and finally received support about 4 years ago to entertain this. Had many community meetings. Really, truly, the intent of this is to be able to offer some flexibility to existing industrial lands that have potential that folks today can't use because of the restrictions on the size of structures. It also offers bringing some making some larger parcels available that, really Lane County needs and has proven through various different studies that's needed in our community for hopefully for businesses to locate here or to grow into, with fully the intent of economic development and job creation. And I believe that staff's done a great job in addressing those 3 items that were remanded. So with that, I would like to move approval of ordinance PA 1317 in the matter of amending ordinance number PA 1282 to adopt additional findings addressing the LUBA remand issue and supporting the statewide planning goal 14 reasons exception to allow urban levels of industrial development on the existing rural industrial lands in Goshen.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologize for being late. Just real quickly, just wanted to confirm, in fact, I was in my second term as mayor. That's how long ago this was, when Commissioner Stewart, we were at a meeting and he was coming up with this different idea about potentially what to do with Goshen. So that's some 9 years ago, Commissioner Stewart. So 6 years ago, I think, is where we got the county got the ball rolling. But it was 9 years ago when you actually approached that, and we're just talking to me as a regional mayor, just having that discussion. So it's pretty amazing how far we've gotten. And by the way, I was just want to say compliment to both Steve and Mark. Great job on responding back to LUBA. I think you really hit it very, very well. And, you never know what the future holds, but based on what I see here, very, very good job, and really appreciate it. Good work.
Commissioner Sorensen.
When I first got on this board, one of the main policy directions was to have the Lane County Waste Management Division build a pipeline from the Lane County dump to the connector for the Eugene Springfield wastewater management system. And the idea was to build this pipeline to deal with the leachate that's being trucked from the dump into the Eugene Springfield wastewater system. And it's been trucked for at least 20 years that I'm aware of, which is an improvement over it being just dumped into the creek that was being done before. But the concern of some people at the time was, well, if this pipeline is built down I-5 to take the water from this leachate water up to the Eugene Springfield wastewater system, that it could be, the pipe could be expanded, or the pipe could be built at a larger size, and other wastewater could be put into that pipe, and you could expand the footprint of the Eugene Springfield metropolitan area down I-5, maybe including the CV Loop area and the LCC basin, all the way down to what we see now as Goshen, and even down into the area just north of Creswell where the dump is. And that this would be a phenomenal thing to have the government pay for this big pipe that would be down there, because their purpose would be stated as being to move the county's leachate up to a treatment facility that services the Eugene Springfield area. For a variety of reasons, the investment of public funds to do that was stopped. And I think that was a good thing. And I'll tell you why. Because if we are going to have this kind of development, the least we could do is ask the people that would benefit from this development to pay for it. And that is really the heart of this, to me, is if the people would pay for these developments that are going to benefit from it, then you might have a more unanimity of attitude about this. But it looks like that there will be the CV Loop development occurring simultaneously with the Goshen development, and probably, depending on the outcome of the wastewater study, the wastewater shipment or the pipeline into the Eugene Springfield wastewater system. So, to me, these things are all interrelated. And I agree, maybe my lawyer hat could be put on me and I could say, well, wait a minute, this is just rezoning this one piece of property and it's not really tied into the Lane County Short Mountain landfill problems. It's not really tied into the CV Loop development. On another level, it's all related, and it's all one area that's in the southeast corner of Eugene or the southwest corner of Springfield, and it, in fact, is all related. So I know that there's a lot of enthusiasm about taking some industrial brownfield land and getting that turned into some more productive property. But I think that at least the critique is, and I'm sensitive to this critique, that the impact of this decision is not simply the rezoning of this one little area. So that's my rationale for a no vote.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting that Commissioner Sorensen brings up the history on the 3-inch line that was proposed, I think, back in 1998, perhaps. And I was on the Eugene City Council when we discussed that, and I think the Eugene City Council was probably had the hands on the brakes during that particular period of time. And it's I'm looking at some information. Treat the leachate on site. Same headline, adjacent headline. Reject the sheriff's measure. Same kind of thinking. It's like. In order to really adequately take care of the things that we need to take care of, we have to really think about the best way to do things. Right now, trucking leachate from Short Mountain is just, it's hideous that we're doing that. Whereas if we'd built a 3-inch line back in 1998 without any chance of anybody tapping into it, it was just a 3-inch line, which Barbara Keller, I believe it was, said would blow a hole in the urban growth boundary. It's pretty stagnated thinking, I believe, at the time that caused us to not move forward with that at that point in time. It really has nothing to do with the discussion we have today. But interesting that history was brought up because I'm kind of steeped in it. It's my early days on the Eugene City Council. And back then we were rejecting sheriff's measures, as it turns out. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? If it weren't for the fact that we're already running into our budget committee time, I could spend some time addressing why it's not feasible to tap into a pressure sewer line that's sized for one development to support another, or the fact that the financing for whatever sewer system goes in there is not being set by this decision today and will most likely be at the expense of the developers of those properties. So I won't get into the technical aspects of that today. Any other discussion of the motion? If not, would you call the roll, please, Mr. Mokahysky?
Commissioner Sorensen.
No.
Commissioner Stewart.
Aye.
Commissioner Lycan.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Yes.
Commissioner Bozievich.
Aye. Thank you. That ends this item and review of assignments. Mr. Mokahysky.
I don't have any other than the request to have a work session on emergency management to follow up on those things. I said we'd bring that back June 2nd. So I think that'll be the next opportunity to talk about those issues.
Thank you. We don't have executive session. Any other business for the board? Seeing and hearing none, I will adjourn, and I think we're going to reconvene as budget committee in about 5 minutes when Lane Metro is able to transfer.
I know.